Can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing in partnership with sharpbetting.co.uk, your home for betting tips and analysis. Delighted as always to be joined by friend of the channel, Luke Cattell. Luke, good to be joined by you as always. This is the preview video for what's probably going to be the biggest fight to take place in the UK this year. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, April 26th. Luke, good to be joined by you. It's been a little while. We'll go straight into it as always. Are you are you excited for this fight? For some people, it means a lot. For some people, it doesn't mean so much. Conor Benn obviously stepping up in weight. We all know the history between the two dads. Conor Benn has obviously had problems with the failed drugs tests as well. Does this fight excite you ahead of April 26th?
Okay, so I'm gonna be a negative Nancy and say it doesn't, but there's context for it, right? First off, I'm an American and I'm aware of both the family, the father, and the fighters, but I just don't have the context a British fight fan would have where they're fighting in your time zone and they're relevant figures and you're that's one part. The other part is I was excited in about 2022 when the fight was originally going to happen. And that whole, just the whole issue around it has kind of made me lose enthusiasm for the fight. That it's gone on for so long. Uh, we could unpack that further, but just the fact that this fight has had so many hurdles and it's finally getting there, and it doesn't feel like they were good hurdles to get to this point.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of people. I think it's one of those where a lot of people will be watching this fight, but whether it's the fight that it was, and whether it should be happening, are kind of a different questions. Going into it a little bit, Luke, I've got a bit of a weird memory. I kind of remember conversations that happened years ago, that other people might not remember, but I do remember speaking to you 2.5 years ago, and I remember you said you were leaning towards Conor Benn. I don't remember the exact reasons. I remember Eubank had this kind of this weight that he had, that this catch weight that he had to make that he hadn't been at for a very long time. Conor Benn was looking very good with wins over Samuel Vargas and Chris Algieri. Um, let's go into that a little bit more, if that's okay. And I want to ask you if the fight had happened. I know it's a tricky question. If the fight had happened, do you still think Conor Benn would have won back in 2022?
So I'm a person that's really big on momentum. I like momentum for fighters. I might be hippy dippy in that way. Some guy like my friend Eddie Croft, a really good boxing coach, he'll be like, well, a good right hand can mess up momentum. I took Rayo Valenzuela over Antoine Russell, and that looked stupid. But I just felt at that time Connor Bend was trending upward to being a star and the next star for Matchroom, whereas Eubank had kind of had inconsistent performances, whereas Ben had the more consistent performances. One thing about if I'm going to try to predict a fight, which is always the hardest thing to do, is I'm going to go with the guy that's consistent. We knew Ben produced a certain level. Eubank, there's been a wide variety. Now I view both of them as kind of fairly inconsistent fighters that I don't see as top title contenders, except for the drawing ability, the money they can bring in. So now I see it more as just a novelty fight. So at the time, I used to view this fight more as a sport type fight. Now I just look at it as an attraction, and I don't really have any context to put either fighter in.
Yeah, and I think one thing about this fight is that it doesn't really affect anyone else. This isn't for a world title. It's not some sort of eliminator. Conor Benn might never fight at middleweight again. Chris Eubank Jr. could retire. It's one of those where I think to ask who are they going to fight next is a bit silly because there's so many fighters in kind of what three or four different weight divisions that could be involved here. So it's such an open fight. But regardless of everything, it's a big fight. It's on the night whether people don't like it or not. People will be tuning in to watch it. I've got a couple more for you, Lukey, and then I do want to be annoying, and I do want to get your prediction. Where do you think Eubank Jr. is at? Do you think he is kind of finished, and this is just the final hurrah, the final payday, and you kind of maybe don't blame him for taking it? Um, do you think he's got 3 or 4 years left? 35 years old now. Hasn't been in too many wars. Seems to have lived the life. Where's your head at in terms of where he's at in his career?
He's a hard one, right? Because it's like he's definitely at the end of his career, but it's like his career didn't really materialize the way we all thought. Like it felt like he should have gotten more out of it. Felt like he was in the running for a Golovkin fight for a long time, and that never happened. Feels like he could win this fight and maybe get a Canelo fight. Like it's hard to put it in context because he never really had those quote unquote great fights of the era. He always just kind of was around. This is kind of his defining moment. So I do think he's towards the end. But in terms of the damage component, I have no clue where to assess him because really we haven't seen a ton from him, or at least I haven't. And maybe that's an American bias. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one. I think another factor is how easily what does he look like at 160 pounds now as well? He's been talking about moving up for a little while. So yeah, what will he look like on weigh-in day? I want to ask as well, Lukey, are either of these guys going to win a world title in your opinion? Chris Eubank Jr., I think it's quite clear why he's in the sport. He's in the sport to make money, and I think if being in the sport to make money and being in the sport to win a world title is two very different things. Um, Conor Benn, on the other hand, hasn't fought for a world title like Eubank has, and has a lot more time to do so. But whether he is kind of good enough to win a world title is a different question. Do you see either of guys accomplishing that in their careers?
I mean they could, right? Because they're interesting fighters and they're relevant fighters, and I think they're both underrated fighters. And if they were to fight a champion, depending on who it is, I wouldn't be shocked if they won. But it also kind of shows you how inactive and how inconsequential they've become, where I don't think about them in any divisions.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. And as I said beforehand, the question of who these guys are going to fight is who these guys could fight next or in the future is so open. And yeah, we're going to kind of see. I think Conor Benn in particular, it's struggled to see where he's going to be long term in weight wise. Always good to get your thoughts, Luke. You always appreciate how honest you are. And with that, I want to get your opinion on what you think is going to happen. Chris Eubank Jr. is the slight favorite. It's in his weight division. He's the more proven fighter, perhaps. There's question marks um over kind of how really good is Conor Benn. The power maybe seems to have not been there the last couple of fights, whereas as it was beforehand. We're about 3, 4 weeks away from the fight when this video is being filmed, and I know predictions can change, but as things stand, where's your head at?
Yeah, it's hard for me to deviate from Ben, just because he's the younger guy, the guy with momentum, the guy that to me seems to have more promise. Just feels like, and maybe I'm wrong, right? I can be wrong. Every every Eubank fight when he kind of steps up, they don't really go his way. You know, the one fight that I think you could point to is Matt Korobov, but I thought he was losing every moment of that fight until, Korobov got injured. So I just don't trust Eubank in this position.
You mentioned the step up there, and obviously Eubank, he stepped up and lost to Billy Joe Saunders, George Groves, Liam Smith, and then beat Liam Smith in a rematch. So do you see what makes you call this a step up and put Conor Benn in that same kind of echelon of fighters?
Just the money involved in the stage. I don't think it's the fighters, but I think that I guess why I say a step up, it might not be the difference in talent, but I think that the pageantry and the psychological wear and tear that you have to I see, because I think that's the issue, right? He beat James DeGale when DeGale was late in his career, but if I remember, that wasn't as big of a pageantry fight. He's kind of struggled, in my opinion, when the fights are at a different level. I think that I was nervous when he was fighting the guy that had fought Golovkin, Camille, because it seems like he gets a little out of himself and he starts to have like this exaggerated personality, this showy personality, and I think that's kind of the nerves showing. And you saw it with like the egg, busting the egg over the head. I think that that's the way he deals with nerves, and I think that for me, it's not as much the step up of competition as it is the step up of the stage. He hasn't really handled going to that next level, the stage, very well, in my opinion.
Great. All right. Loved it. Really, really, really appreciate your time as well, Luke. We will look forward to April 26th and seeing what happens. Thank you very much for your time.
All good.